wondering about, like, it seems that we're in a period of literal unrest. And it seems to me that sometimes there's actually only like a very small group of people who are kind of out there on the front lines, doing a lot of the mobilizing and all of that kind of stuff. And that for that group of people, that rest is not, it doesn't seem to be available. It doesn't seem, the resilience kind of turns to, or the need to kind of be out there and keep pushing, turns to what you alluded to earlier, which is the burnout, and then a retreat, and just sort of saying, I can't deal with this anymore, and exiting. So how, like, what's your experience with sort of thinking through those things, especially considering the many different ways that you've used your body in your work and kind of doing different sort of projects and stuff like that?
Well, something that it has been introduced or integrated and practiced a lot more now is care for the folks that are on the front lines a lot of the time. And that means personal responsibility, but it also means community responsibility, and community care. And those are terms that are thrown around a lot, I think, but to actually put things into practice in particular ways, for me personally, to look after myself, there's a practice that I'm continually developing and continually tweaking through the body, like the exercise that we started with, and doing that continuously throughout the day, like, every hour, every 2 hours, or whenever I start to recognize that I need to do these exercises. So at times where
what's the actual impact of doing that?
Can you
explain a little bit more, like, why is it beneficial for us to do that?
Right. So those exercises, I recognize when I need to do them throughout the day, when I feel my nervous system getting keyed up to a point that I'm now able to recognize it's not going to be that productive anymore. So when I do those exercises, there's very specific things that I look for. Things that are indicators that my nervous system is starting to calm down. It's when my breathing slows down, yawning. Like, these are really basic things that we overlook a lot of the times because we don't really notice that, or we don't know that those are even things to look for. So when my breathing slows down, when I start to yawn, when my eyes water, when my stomach starts to gurgle, these are all very, very subtle, nuanced physiological responses to our nervous system starting to calm down. And those, for me, those are happening after I do these types of exercises throughout the day. So this is something that I feel really passionate about as far as introducing into the movements that we're doing, as far as the movements of our bodies on a day-to-day basis, whether we're walking from our house out to the TTC or out to our cars, whether we're in political movements on the front lines, in the streets, or political movements behind the scenes, doing a lot of work on Zoom, doing these meetings, having these meetings and these conversations. Integrating those sort of exercises throughout the day across the board, and whatever your activism looks like, I think can be really, really impactful and really helpful. And from my personal experience, I've noticed that, and it's helped with my recovery from a lot of things a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. So you gave us an example of one of the kind of exercises that we just did, just kind of noticing, leading yourself through a series of questions, taking a deep breath. You're suggesting that we just kind of try to incorporate that all along during the day, regardless of whether we're having a busy day or whether we're in the middle of organizing a protest, or is just like kind of start to make that a daily practice. Is that what you're saying?
A daily practice, a daily ritual, similar to how meditation and mindfulness, it has been encouraged to make into a daily practice. These are practices that the entry point into calming the nervous system down is through the body. It's through physical movements rather than stillness and focusing on the mind. Because I think mindfulness is very, very effective. I think it's very important. And I think it's one option that we have. And what I would love to do is present this other option of through the body, because for some folks, again, like depending on what type of learner one is, depending on what type of trauma people have experienced, sitting down and watching our thoughts, being mindful, focusing on our breath. When I say be mindful, I say that in quotations because I think it's important to be mindful, but the practice of mindfulness through meditation, unless our environment is set up in a particular way, and unless our day-to-day activities are set up in a particular way to support us going into looking at our mental patterns, that could actually start to kick up a lot more anxiety, and it can kick up aspects of trauma for people, where these exercises actually can help to calm down the nervous system and can work in conjunction with meditation in a particular way that makes it far more impactful.
So just to back up, for those who might not be familiar with the term mindfulness, what do you mean when you use that term?
When I'm using that term, I'm thinking about something that is similar to what I talked about with regards to embodiment, where we're present in a particular way with what we're doing. So one of the practices of mindfulness, if I take a sip of water from my glass, I'm very mindful of reaching underneath my computer, pulling my glass up, putting it to my mouth, feeling the sensation in my mouth, swallowing the water, and understanding what that, or not understanding what the experience is, but being in the experience. So it's an entry point of attention to all the things that we do through more of a mental process. The exercise that I brought you through, and some of the other exercises that I practice, are things where we don't necessarily have to think about what we're doing. They're really simple, basic processes that when we start to do things like yawning, our eyes start watering, our stomach starts gurgling, then we know that our nervous system is calming down a little bit more. And doing that in conjunction with the thought-driven mindfulness, it makes it that much more impactful.
But then you said that your environment can actually work against that. What should we think about in terms of the environment in which we are finding ourselves in, and what's maybe within our control, what's not within our control in terms of the environment?
Right. So say we're in a toxic workplace where we're dealing with a lot of racism or dealing with homophobia, or any of the other isms. If we're mindful about that, because when trauma kicks in there and our survival mechanism kicks in, our focus can go to the source of that trauma or the source of that anxiety. So when we're mindful and we're practicing mindfulness, sometimes our thought process continues on that track. It focuses on the source of the trauma or the sensations of the trauma or the experience of the trauma. Unfortunately, what that can do is go into that negative feedback loop that I was talking about before, where, like, if we don't sleep, then our digestion can get impacted. If our digestion is impacted, we're not getting nutrients. Like, it's a negative feedback loop for our nervous system when we're focusing on the trauma or being mindful about things that our environment is causing pain or discomfort or harm. So these exercises that are body-based can actually help to calm down our nervous system, reorient our focus away from the trauma and to what feels good in our body, what feels safe. They're things that help us to regulate in particular ways, to know how to get out of that situation, whether it means taking breaks to go to the washroom where it's safe, where we're in our cubicle to do these exercises to calm our nervous system down.
I was just going to ask you about that, because I was just going to say, like, what if you've you feel like you're in an environment on a daily basis where you're not being respected, you're maybe being attacked, you're maybe being undermined, you're maybe being subjected to gaslighting and told that your complaints are not legitimate,
right,
or that you're just imagining things.
right.
If you're subjected to that kind of environment on a daily basis, and you feel trapped, and all of those things are going to start to kick in that you talked about. Like, what can you do in that? What are some of the small things that are within anybody's control to be able to start to incorporate, knowing that that's obviously not going to be the whole answer?
Right.
But
right. Yeah, it's one, I'm presenting one possibility to be able to pull back some energy and to feed into our resilience, to figure out ways to get out of those situations or to change our environment. That's what we're all working towards, right? On a macro level and a micro level. So things as simple as a longer exhale than an inhale. So some people like to count, like a count of 3 on an inhale and then a count of 6 on the exhale. Some people just take a long, slow exhale, but doing that consistently for about 60 seconds or so, or doing like 4 to 5 of those breaths, that's a very basic, simple tool that can be done on a regular basis that no one knows that you're doing. So you could be in the middle of a very hostile environment. And if you can incorporate that breathing while you're in that environment, that helps to regulate your nervous system in a particular way that can make it a little bit more manageable, or at least you can possibly call on other resources within yourself. Because one of the things that happens when I'm talking about a trauma-informed movement, one of the things that happens when we're in those sort of hostile environments is a type of dissociation. And I think dissociation is actually a brilliant, brilliant coping mechanism and survival tool. What becomes a problem is when we're in that dissociative state too long, because all those processes, they're the examples of those processes that I talked about, like the adrenals kicking out adrenaline. All of that is still happening when we're in this dissociative state, because that dissociative state is a way to maintain our survival in a particular way and in a particular environment. So the recognition of being in a dissociative state, I think, is the difference between it being functional and leading to dysfunction.
So just to get more granular, like what does it look like when we're in a dissociative state? Manifest.
What it can feel like is a disconnect from parts of our body. Like sometimes we can't really access what the sensation is, sometimes of our extremities, sometimes of our guts, sometimes of our heart. Like staring off into the distance. Sometimes that happens when we're tired, but when we're engaging with something that's hostile, there can be like this glaze that comes over our eyes.
I've heard that expression before, like my eyes glazing over.
Yeah.
Or feeling checked out. I've heard people saying that, but so it manifests in sort of like this empty gaze, or just not feeling your extremities, you said, or what else?
Our senses get affected, because sometimes our hearing can be affected in particular ways where when our nervous system is kicked in a particular way that is responding to hostility, we can hear high frequencies or very low frequencies. And this is like a lot of stuff that has to do with the reptilian brain, like low frequencies, like a growl. Like everyone always uses this analogy, like if a tiger or a lion is coming after you, how your nervous system responds. That is actually happening in our day-to-day experiences, in the offices that we're working in, sometimes riding the TTC. That low frequency that we start to hear, or higher frequencies, those are, when we hear that, that's going into survival mode. We tend to lose that middle ground frequencies that allow for more engagement, where we hear a range of different frequencies. That glazing over as well, it interrupts the possibility of deeper engagement. It interrupts the possibility of expansive thinking, imaginative thinking, creative thinking. So those are some of the things that can happen when we go into a dissociative state. And
just shutting off our own ability to think through how we can actually emerge from this situation.
Yeah, it's like our ideas, instead of being expansive, they kind of go into this tunnel vision. And literally our vision can also go into tunnel vision, where it's like, I need to get to where I need to get, either tunnel vision, or it can go hyper wide, like this hypervigilance that can happen, where we start to become aware of our surroundings as a survival mechanism. Yeah, there's all of these processes that are happening in the body that that can lead to all of these ailments that I talked about. But there's also these basic exercises that can be done to help to mitigate the impact of that, and to help to calm our nervous system down, to allow us to be healthier physiologically in our bodies, and to allow us to maintain a creative thought process and an openness to other people and other situations that are safe. Like our bodies are highly intelligent. There's something really specific that I want to mention too, with regards to dissociation, and with regards to dissociation in the context of bringing it back to what I was talking about at the beginning, how the Americas have been founded. Everyone here is impacted by colonialism, by imperialism. And when I say everyone, I'm also meaning the oppressor as well. I'm starting to rethink privilege in terms of dissociation, and how privilege allows people to be disconnected from the impact that either their actions personally or the system that ancestrally they've helped to create, or the system that we participate in creates. There's a level of dissociation that takes place to look away from the impact of that.
Yeah.
But the dissociation for like folks or the demographics in the dominant culture versus folks who are being impacted by racism, transphobia, homophobia, ableism, the impact of each of those is very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, rest looks like something completely different based on your class position.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's an interesting point, is that for the rich, rest, leisure, pleasure, bodily pleasures of all kinds are just always constantly on offer, and actually lead them to kind of disconnect from the rest of society and the rest of the world and the sources of even where that wealth comes from.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're talking about for us, who are constantly being subjected to these isms and systemic injustices, is that we need to think about rest in terms of even in the everyday minutes of our lives, as a way of being able to not just put up with whatever it is that we're being subjected to, but to protect ourselves, to literally protect ourselves and protect our mental faculties, our emotional and spiritual faculties, and be able to connect with what we need.
Yeah.
What we need, as what our bodies need, and to be able to demand that too, like ultimately, right? Because sometimes, we have had to demand the right to rest.
Yeah.
We've had to like fight and say, no, I shouldn't have to be forced to go back to work. Especially if it's in a toxic environment, when my body is telling me something different. My body is telling me I need to actually remove myself from this situation, at least for a period of time. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
So, and one of our problems is actually getting large institutions, it could be the university or any other kinds of institutions, to kind of recognize what our bodies need. I mean, like throughout slavery, of course, and in exploitative work conditions, we have been punished for resting. I mean, I was just reading about the sleeping car porters. Ironically, they are serving people who are in sleeping cars, so they're allowed to sleep, but they oftentimes were fired if they just nodded off, or were trying to get a nap, because they were expected to be on, literally 24/7. And so, and oftentimes they were actually falsely accused of sleeping on the job.
Right.
And then fired.
Right.
So there's all of these ways in which the structures that we're living in are imposing these ways in which we kind of constantly have to deny our bodies, deny what they need, deny the rest, deny even what we're seeing, deny even what we're hearing.
Yeah.
And especially deny what we're feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit more about some of your own experiences as a dancer, as an athlete, as an RMT, or some of the other creative ways that you've used your body to kind of expand the imagination, in fact, and see that as a font for us feeling energized, us feeling like strong, and able to actually create change.
Well, I can talk about a few different things, like coming from a history of being an athlete, and doing a lot of competitive sports, moving into dance, still using my body in particular ways. And now at this point in my life, with my years of experience as a massage therapist, and the search for healing in particular ways, for me personally, has been through movement and through the body and the use of the body, partly because there's so much joy that's experienced in moving for me, and through sports and through dance. The thing that I'm coming to right now, though, and which has been a search for me, is what does healing look like in that capacity? And I thought moving from sports into dance could answer that question for me. And it started to answer that question, but it hasn't entirely, because what I'm finding, what my experience has been in dance, similarly to sports, is that there's a need to train the body in a particular way that understandably creates a container. Like if we go through, say, drills and different exercises as in sports, like as a basketball player, there would be layup after layup after layup, or a free throw, practicing free throws. There's this repetitive nature to learn the skill, and that creates a container to be able to do that skill, and then to be creative from that container. What I've come to realize in my exploration is that training and that container, depending on how it's used, can actually facilitate a type of dissociation as well. And I'm realizing one of the things about aging and about injuries that I have, part of the training that I've had as an athlete was to kind of push through it, and to engage in pain in a particular way as part of the healing mechanism. And that it can become a very, very fine line around what is the edge of good pain versus bad pain. And that's an edge that a lot of people don't know what that is necessarily. So in my creative process, I'm now starting to look at what does movement, like I'm calling myself a movement artist rather than a dancer now, because I want to explore what movement looks like in a way that that I can move up against that edge of good pain versus bad pain, and in ways that I do not get disembodied. So a way that I can still stay present in my body in a way that's going to be healing and healthy, and that is a creative action, that is a creative process that I can share with others and that I can engage in with others. And with that, I want to contextualize the importance of arts and creativity. And, like when COVID hit, it it's arts and creativity that we've turned to help to take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
to help look after ourselves. And ironically, you know, it's the artists who tend to get overlooked, who tend to get underfunded,
Yeah.
in the way that our system is set up right now, or the way that our system is set up right now as far as granting. It's great that we get grants. The way that it's set up is you get a grant and then you produce. You get a grant and then you produce. That works for some folks. For the majority of folks, it doesn't work because it demands this this production model rather than a creativity model. Mm-hmm. That doesn't allow for this durational creativity to happen and inspirational creativity to happen.
So precariousness all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I just want to stress the importance of arts and how underfunded, undersupported artists are unless they're in a particular industry like Hollywood. But then the violence that exists for racialized artists in that industry is incredible as well. You know, but I'm just thinking of along the scope and the span of compensation, financial compensation for knowledge production that's done creatively through the arts. There's such a vast scope around that, and that is still, the arts are still what we turn to feel better. We play music to feel better. We go to plays. We engage in the arts in particular ways that COVID, I think, has also been another big, there's been another big reveal in COVID, how much we turn to that to help to soothe ourselves and to calm ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. So I see that we're almost at time. I'm wondering if you want to leave us with a few things that you want us to keep thinking about as we continue dealing with COVID, as we continue fighting these various forms of discrimination, as we, prepare ourselves for September.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you can leave us with a few tips or things to think about in terms of our bodies, particularly. Mm-hmm. And maybe close us out with another exercise.
Sure. A little bit more technical information about the nervous system, about the brain. We have two hemispheres of the brain, the right side and the left side. Often when trauma occurs, when we're trying to process it, the information can sometimes not cross over because we always want this crossing to happen. It's like a flow of information that happens to the body. But when trauma occurs, sometimes the processing part of it can happen in one side of the brain or one part of the brain. So another thing that, another exercise that we can do that helps with that cross-body activity is if you cross your arms facing, and everyone can do this right now, crossing your arms facing your palms together. If you interlock your hands, interlock your fingers, and then if it's comfortable for you on your wrists and your elbows, wrap your fingers underneath so that your hands are resting next to your heart. So this is one of these positions or exercises or practices that can be done. I'm going to give you two exercises. This is one of them that can be done that is, as you can see, there's a lot of crossing that's happening. There's a crossing of the arms, there's a crossing of the hands, there's a crossing of the fingers. So in this position, you can combine this with a deep breath in. So breathing in at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Exhaling at the count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, breathing in at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Exhaling at the count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if this position isn't accessible for folks, this is great to do. This is another one to do. The position itself is one thing, and then there's more stimulation that can be done by tapping as well. So you can tap side to side as well as combine the breathing. So breathing in for 3, 1, 2, 3, and exhale for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are a couple of different ones that can be done, and a nice combination of things that can be done too. It seems very, very simple. It seems very, very basic, but it can be really effective if it's done on a regular basis.
Wow, great. Great, great, great. So as we train our minds and we engage in the intellect and all of that kind of stuff, we understand that it's also connected to our spirituality. We understand that it's connected to our body, and we understand that our body is not disconnected from our minds, that everything is interconnected, and that when we bring ourselves back into our senses and bring ourselves back into the basic awareness that everything is interconnected, we are all interconnected. This is what we have to constantly remind ourselves of, because there's so many forces that are trying to
absolutely
divide, right? Divide and conquer. But
yeah, and you said it better.
So thank you so much for giving us a lot today. Like you've brought us through a whole conversation where we've talked about the historical aspects of this, the bodily aspects of this, in concrete terms, in political terms, in so many different ways. And you've given us like several really practical things that we can do that are totally within our control when we're faced with all of these kinds of demands and challenges on us. Yeah. So we're kind of like, we're going to be more equipped to kind of deal with it, knowing that this is a part of many, many different things that we need to do.
Yes.
So now I'm going to say to myself, the next time I'm going to go out for a demo, or before I begin a talk or other things, I'm going to start to incorporate, like, you know.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And deeper. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Kike, CESAR, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.